The year is 2025. You're a Gacha gamer. You have played Gacha games your whole life, either starting with Genshin Impact from the Gacha boom in COVID, or the OGs that started during the late 2010s with games like FGO and Summoner's War. After every title, every change of pace, after every genre, every community that you have been in, there's one thing that has been a constant in every single Gacha game you have ever played: power creep. This has been a word that has sent shivers down the spines of every gacha player. The moment Powercreep is mentioned, their eyes widen, their sweat trickles down from their forehead, and with an almost primal instinct, players begin to vigorously discuss with the online communities about this topic for any gacha game. We have all played these games before, for any gacha game in the market. But for today, I do want to offer a deep dive into this topic as it transcends beyond just honkaistarrail and why this phenomenon continues to exist after decades of gacha gaming throughout the entire world. Chapter 1: Existence. Now, it's important to first establish or at least acknowledge that yes, your gacha game does in fact has power creep, and this is not up for debate. Period. This doesn't matter if it's honkaistarrail, it doesn't matter if it's Wuthering Waves, Zenless Zone Zero, Genshin Impact, or any gacha game in the history of gacha games. There's also a saying where only PvP gacha games have power creep and PvE gachas don't. No! They both have it, except one is player against player, and the latter is basically player against AI. Sort of. The reason why it is so important to establish is because people who lack comprehension often misunderstand whether power creep even exists in their gacha games, going to the typical discussions of things like, my version 1 4-star blue rarity unit can solo the hardest content in the entire game and therefore there's no power creep in my gacha game. Now this is seen from every single community where often ignorant players will deny power creep as a whole. Honkai-style power creep defenders will show Scylla 1 cost 0 cycles, Wuthering Wave power creep defenders will show Danjing soloing hologram, Zenless Zone 0 power creep defenders will show Alan 30-second clears, and Genshin power creep defenders will show Burnett being every single team ever since version 1. Now to be clear, since we are on this topic again, I want to make it abundantly clear I have never once denied power creep's existence in honkaistarrail, nor the HP inflation in the endgame content, only the problems to its player base, but I digress as we're going to talk about in today's content, right? So the best way I can illustrate this is to imagine where the gacha players, we are all drivers, right? We are all pilots for race cars. Back when race cars were first invented, the models were far inferior compared to the standards today in terms of handling, acceleration, top speed, and the whole package. So race car power creep, you could say, is going to be here, especially for the newer race cars. So let's just say, the drivers back in those days, to get their certificate of accomplishment last time, you need to clear the racetrack in, for example, 1 minute. But nowadays, because we do have the access to all these brand new race cars with a lot better quality, you will have to finish the racetrack in 30 seconds. So for one to deny there is power creep in racing is somewhat similar to a driver saying, hey look, I can still complete the entire lap in 30 seconds using my old car. Therefore, there's no power creep in the forms of all the brand new cars. While this driver could have the skills, knowledge, and the expertise to make use of the old cars, one could also make the argument that the exact same driver, but with an improved car, could probably finish the lap in 25 or maybe even 20 seconds. Likewise, another driver, and most like this is gonna be for a majority of the drivers out there that are less experienced, would not be able to accomplish this feat using the old cars. At some point, the skill of a driver can only bring you so far before acknowledging the actual vehicle has become better with improved functionalities as time progresses. This is how power creep works. Whether or not the new car is better than the old car, that's not up for debate. But whether you as a player can clear with the old car doesn't change the fact that the new car is ultimately going to be better than the old cars. And this has been the case for every single gacha game in existence. So to demonstrate this a little bit further, let's just take a look at this hypothetical power creep chart with Y being a unit's power and X being the time in gacha. The important thing to note here is any data against the trend does not represent the entire trend. If a singular point in the early versions of a gacha game has shown to perform the same, if not even better than other data points in the trend line, it does nothing to disprove that generally speaking, every single gacha game's new units always tend to trend upwards in terms of linear progression. So once you as a gacha gamer understand that yes, power creep is inevitable. It can drastically change your perception on how you look at new units that launch in gacha games as a whole. And the reason why power creep will exist in every single gacha game is because power creep is part of the reason how gacha games operate as a business. And the formula is gonna be almost identical for any gacha game. You first launch your gacha to make it as easy as possible to attract the largest possible demographic. You get players engaged, make the game as approachable as possible, and you make them feel like they are pro gamers, that they will never be in games like League of Legends or Elden Ring, so they can feel a sense of superiority when they get the max rewards in the gacha game's endgame, and slowly but surely involve the players into the game's ecosystem of communities, discussions, daily logins, free pools, quality of life, dev listens, so on and so forth, right? The initial launch of any game will always be the biggest influx of a player base unless something absolutely insane happens in the future. For example, take a look at Snowbreak Containment Zone, right? But I digress. So it is absolutely pivotal for any game, including gacha games, to make it as appealing as possible to the most number of players. And gacha games do this by making it easy, making it casual friendly, making it accessible, right? Draw you in with, look at this, we have 100 pools, 200 pools, 300 pools. You can use 4 stars, 3 stars to clear every single endgame, and these games we have all played before. So once a core audience has been established, that's when the difficulty within the gacha game will start to ramp up over time. Your same version 1 team comps in a version 1 enemy may clear with a perfect score, but I would dare say it is basically impossible for the exact same team, I say this as the exact same team, to achieve the exact same performance 1 version or 2 version down the road against enemies in version 2 or version 3. Because, newsflash, version 2 and version 3 enemies were not designed with version 1 units. That's crazy. With every new update, as players' accounts get progressively stronger, either through a wider roster of units, better gear quality, or simply understanding the game better as they play more, the difficulty will always gradually increase so as to increase the player's retention in playing the game. If the difficulty of the endgame content remains exactly the same 1 year or 2 years down the road, but players have access to units that are much stronger later, it almost defeats the purpose of even introducing these stronger units in the first place, because it will bring you almost no achievement or joy if players just beat everything blindfolded with no hands, no sweat. A similar analogy can be made for playing with cheat codes like Who's Your Daddy in Warcraft 3 or smurfing in Bronze for League of Legends, even though you're basically like a plat player in League just to shit on the noobs. For example, Tempest Memphis in Wuthering Waves was extraordinarily difficult on launch when everybody only had level 60 units and people were getting one shot left, right, center using the standard units. Fast forward to this day, the current version of this boss is nowhere near as difficult with the inclusion of new units as well as your level 90 weapons and levels, right? Upgraded echo quality, and generally speaking, the entire structure of a player's account makes them a lot stronger fighting the exact same boss compared to the previous version. And this brings us to the next topic. Chapter 2. Benefit. Since we have established that power creep is inevitable, this is going to be my nuclear take. Power creep can be good for a gacha game if and only if handled properly. Eventually, the feeling of power and satisfaction you feel since the game's launch, it would become meaningless, and players will automatically yearn for something more of a challenge, just like how Saitama is depressed since he one-punches everyone he fights. The difference between these analogies and gacha game, at least the mainstream non-PvP gacha games, is that these gacha games does not have a competitive system that pits players against players. It is always going to be players against the PvE content. In order for the game to not feel stale, especially launching all the new units as well as the stronger and improved accounts, PvE will then scale upwards to appropriately accommodate for the increase in power. If the same version 1 team in honkaistarrail of Scylla, Pella, Tinyu, and Bailu could clear the current Memory of Chaos 12 with ease just like version 1 in Memory of Chaos 10, can you imagine how numbingly uninteractive it would be for version 2 and even version 3 units? The entire fight will be over in a single aircraft or facial out, Pollards get summoned one time and everything just dies, and consumers will generally have a lot less incentive to pull for the new units outside of just waifu or husbando purposes, since meta is quite literally completely irrelevant if the exact same teams can clear with the exact same level of difficulty. So another example, people would care very little about Jiao Qiu's upgrade to Acheron, Fuchs' upgrade to Silver Break, and Hyacinth's upgrade to Castris. Would people even care about how fun it feels like to play a brand new unit like Miyabi as well as Zani if there isn't a single content challenging enough to bring out the unit's true potential? Will people in Xenoblade Zone Zero bother with the secret text and mechanics or learn a boss interaction if the difficulty remains exactly the same as compared to version 1? Or would you even appreciate the showcases of solo resonator clears in Hologram or Tower of Adversity if the fight was easily done with just like a Ling Yang solo? If the endgame content has the exact same difficulty as they have in launch in order to eliminate power creep, the very same units that players have enjoyed playing with would feel empty. Difficulty for anything in life brings value to the achievements that you strive for. If something was that easy, everybody would be able to do it, and no one would really appreciate the very thing that you did. While difficulty for these live service PvE gacha games are often artificial and done in the forms of power creep, HP inflation, shielding for the rate up unit, it is with these exact same difficulty increases that bonds the community and creates life in the very game that they enjoy. For without hardship, there is no appreciation. If the game lacks an environment to challenge a player, the very same players may eventually get bored and find something else more engaging to play with. And this brings us to the next chapter. Chapter 3. Impact. Now let's take a look at the power creep trend again. The key question players should be asking is not whether the trend is upwards or downwards, because we established it will always be upwards, but rather how steep is the gradient of this trend, or more plainly speaking, how fast is the pace of power creep. Now this is a factor that enters in the realm of subjectivity and discussion because different players will always have different experiences with regards to power creep in their different gacha games, and often at times differing even within the exact same gacha game as well. The best way to approach this topic is by understanding first and foremost, at least for the mainstream PvE gacha games, that it literally does not matter to you as a player. Zero. It serves zero purpose. So for PvP gachas, this is a little bit different because meta, competitiveness, and everything in between, you kind of just signed up for it, right? You already knew what you were getting yourself into by playing PvP gacha games. The thing with these mainstream PvE gacha games, however, is that at the end of the day, no matter what happens to the new units coming out stronger than the last, you as a player can always catch up eventually because there is basically no finishing line. There's no competitiveness, there's no rank 1, there's no trophy for you. At worst, for a casual player that has absolutely zero understanding of the deeper mechanics, you miss out on max clearing for the endgame content for one rotation. And these rewards are absolutely trivial in comparison to the amount of premium currency you have spent to pull for the quote-unquote meta units. Which is why pulling for meta in these PvE gacha games, it literally makes no sense. After you missed out on the max rewards because for whatever reason you lost a 50-50 or you were saving for a future unit or your streamer called you greedy and stupid, eventually the newer unit is gonna come around the next patch, and once those players pull for these brand new units because you actually enjoy these units in the first place and the way they play, you will then go back into full clearing endgame content again, because every single endgame content in these PvE gachas, they will always release catering to the brand new units every single time without fail. In order to why? To incentivize players to pull for the brand new units. The key difference here is, are you a player that pulled because you got incentivized for the FOMO of clearing endgame content, or are you the player that pulled for these units because you actually genuinely enjoyed playing with these units? In my opinion, you should always, as a player, pull for units you enjoy playing and never force yourself to pull for a specific unit just to chase max endgame clears. Sure, you skip Jiao because you wanted Aggron with women. Sure, you skip Robin because you just keep singing non-stop. But eventually, once you look at the bigger picture, even more units will be coming out that could potentially pair with your account even better. For example, right now in version 3, we have 3B and Cypher that will potentially do well with all of these different team comps. Did you maybe not full clear with Aggron and Fei Xiao last time because you skipped Jiao Chu and Robin? Maybe. But what would it have cost you? Nothing. Absolutely nothing, because it costs always way more to pull a unit than to get a 3-star in the endgame content. And my point is, if you only pull for meta and not for enjoyment because you are fixated on getting full clears every single rotation, then at some point you just have to say to yourself, okay, why am I even doing this in the first place? I am literally dropping like 80 pulls, 90 pulls, 100 pulls, 160 pulls if you go full to hard PD just for a reward that is less than a single 10 pull for one clear. Doesn't really make sense. And the worst of all, you are not even enjoying these units in the first place. If you can be transparent with yourself, Do you perhaps feel pressured to pull for these units because your friends in your community are all 3-starring the endgame content and you are not 3-starring? Your favorite streamers like MrPokke roasted the fuck out of your account for skipping all of these supports. All of your guide makers are saying this unit is an absolute must pull unit, or you are literally breaking your account. Perhaps it was the summation of all three and you are letting fear of missing out, quite literally FOMO, getting into you as you are sick of waiting since you don't have enough pulls. If you are perhaps letting external influences affect the way you are enjoying the game, I highly recommend looking at the bigger picture and ask, why do you even play this gacha game in the first place? Was it for others or was it for yourself? And I think the answer is very clear, and hopefully this would bring you clarity as well as inner peace. And this brings us to the final chapter. Chapter 4. Pace. Now with that out of the way, let's just talk about the actual pace of Powercreep in these mainstream PvE gachas. It is very difficult to accurately measure this because data points are basically impossible to tell the whole story. One man clearing in 60 seconds with the exact same team could debunk another man clearing in 180 seconds using the exact same team. Or one man clearing in 3 cycles with the exact same team could also debunk another man clearing in 7 cycles in the exact same team. And my bottom line is, there will always be some kind of improvement a player could make to improve their performance using the exact same units, exact same relics, exact same builds, everything to be exactly the same, be it the fundamentals like for example your tracers, your levels, or something more complex like your rotations, or understanding the boss mechanics. I can't speak on behalf of games that I'm not as knowledgeable of, so I will just stick to my field in honkaistarrail. Now, a very famous metric that I'm pretty sure all of you guys who have watched my channel will be aware of by now is HP inflation being used as a metric to measure power creep. And this is going to be a chart on HSR's MOC12 HP inflation, with a noticeable increase from Big Sleep to Skill Gauge Tidal Flow, which was rare pass better in 2.6, for a 49% increase in single target HP, Dancing with Dreams to Troopship Mayhem, which was D Herda's banner debuting version 3 at a whopping 86% AoE HP increase, and right after the Strife of Creation being Tribi's banner in 3.1 for a roughly 65% overall HP increase. However, before all these, there were also a slight bump on the White Knight Chronicles being Acheron's banner on 2.1, featuring to this day one of the hardest Memory of Chaos 12's adventuring boss debut at a slight 29% overall increase. So if I would ask you this as a player right now, at one look, which do you think marked the biggest or rather fastest pace of power creep? Chances are, you probably have set somewhere between Reba, D Herta, or Tribi banners, which coincides with a lot of discussion as to honkaistarrail's power creep is going out of hand because all these HP inflations in the previous Memory of Chaos 12 have been absolutely crazy. What if I told you it was actually none of the version 3 banners? Because the first thing is, HP inflation is not how you quantify the pace of power creep. Now, alongside the massive increments of HP, we also have access to boss with mechanics that players can utilize to deal massive amounts of damage. Puppet Trio is the perfect example for this on Reba's release because anyone running a Super Raid team with Run Mate before Fuke even came out would absolutely destroy the Puppet Trio, making it one of the easiest Memory of Chaos 12 to this day ever since Super Raid has been a thing, because Super Raid is the rank 1 most owned team comp in the entire world, really needing only Run Mate, who at this point already got a rerun Firefly, the free HMC and Gallagher, and any break DPS would pretty much destroy this. Even Himeko would destroy this boss. The Banana TV boss, which was also the literal thumbnail for my HP inflation video back in the days, it gave the players a wide variety of tools to gain free energy, free skill points, free action value advance, all while dealing very minimal damage as long as players manage to hit the TVs at the right time. The massive HP from Negador also proved to be fake HP, since triggering War Armor and breaking its spears would deal massive percentage max health to the entire boss, to the point where even single target DPS like Fei Xiao could defeat this boss with relative ease. And my point is, power creep is not based on HP inflation. It is based on whether a player has access to the tools to combat their respective endgame content at the respective time of the game, and if not, what other alternatives do these players have? Now, this sounds like a very big chunk of words, but let's just simplify this a little bit. This is a very subjective take, but in my opinion, Aggron's launch was the biggest slope for honkaistarrail's Powercreep pacing. And the reasoning is very simple. Her damage output was so high that it made almost every single version 1 team, which were the alternatives, perform far too weak compared to Aggron herself. Now, we had no access to Super Break, Robin, Tribi, or any real alternatives besides crit DPS, with Aggron being one of the best, if not the best, back when she first launched. At the same time, the Aventurine boss was paired up with a Memory of Chaos debuff that dealt percentage max HP based on the numbers of hits. And if players don't manage to time the number right, which was 6 hits, it will be completely wasted on the dices, which takes 0 damage, leading to one of the most difficult Memory of Chaos, especially for the casual player base, which didn't want to interact with the mechanics. Now, we don't talk with feelings, we will only talk with facts, so let's take a look at these numbers over here for the Memory of Chaos 12 clear rates ever since version 1.6, which was the debut of all Memory of Chaos 12, right? So you can see from this chart over here, the clearing rate for MOC 12 has actually been slowly increasing over time, ever since Aventurine, despite the HP inflation. More players than ever before are clearing the endgame content now compared to the earlier stages of version 1.6, despite units releasing being stronger over time, going from a low 76% clear rate with an average of 9.3 cycles to a consistent roughly 90% clear rate to an average of 7 to 6 cycles ever since. And this sort of presents my point over here. If the pace of power creep in the forms of new units are appropriately matched with the endgame, then the player base will still continue to clear content despite its existence. I do want to point out for version 1.6 specifically, that was the first ever Memory of Chaos 12, this had the historic lowest 3-star rate with a 10.4 average cycle because it was the first ever MOC 12, making it a significant step up for the majority of the player base, therefore the clear rate was just really not that good, right? So as of version 3, I would say that Powercreep has been managed relatively well in honkaistarrail so far. You can call me a oil shield, it is what it is, with none of the 4 version 3 DPS of Herta, Aglaia, Maide, and Castris vastly outperforming others. Pollux as a boss was designed specifically to shield for Castris, so her performance will be overwhelmingly better on top of Hyacinth's introduction, but players can still make use of alternatives in version 3, version 2, or even version 1 teams as long as you have the version 3 supports, because now we have access to a greater arsenal of units and replacements, substitutes, since that was something that we desperately lacked in the early versions of version 2 with Aggron's launch. The clear rate has been the highest ever since version 3 at a whopping 97.62% on top of the fastest 5.5 cycle average due to Pollux and TV both being very straightforward bosses despite their massive HP. Now, as long as version 4 doesn't introduce a similar Aggron situation that completely outclasses the entirety of version 3, 2, and 1 with all of the tools that we've had, which is pretty difficult considering the variety of teams that we have right now compared to version 1. We have Super Break, we have crit DPS, we have your follow-up DPS, we have a HP scaling DPS, DOT maybe is coming back, I don't know. I personally feel that HSR power creep is not that big of a problem as of version 3, unless you're greedy and stupid. So that is going to be my thesis and my personal opinions with regards to honkaistarrail's power creep. For other games like Wuthering Waves, Zenless Zone Zero, Genshin Impact, Nikkei, FGO, Epic 7, all these kind of other games, I don't really have too much to say other than take a look into your community and don't be so easily persuaded by a simple thing of, okay, this unit does giga damage and therefore there's power creep in this game, or endgame content has 10 billion more HP and therefore there's power creep in this game. Always ask yourself as a player, right, as someone that's actually playing the game, do you have the necessary tools to tackle the brand new endgame with or without these brand new units? And if so, are the alternatives acting as a decent substitute to help you clear these endgames even without the new units, right? So for that, I'll ask you guys to leave your comments down below and let me know what you guys think of the other games, right? So that's pretty much it. And with that, thank you for watching this entire video, and to the players in other communities, feel free to comment what you guys feel regarding power creep for your respective gacha games. I personally feel that power creep, while it is going to be everywhere, it is almost like a necessary evil for any gacha game to maintain the player base attention in improving their accounts either via new units, new relics, or learning new playstyle. And the key is really to manage power creep's pace such that players don't feel the pressure to an unhealthy level. To a certain extent, it also filters out the tourists who don't really care for the game and quits because of power creep, when in reality they already lost interest long ago, while keeping the community who actually plays the game still entertained and engaged. With that, we have come to the end of today's content. Word of the day is gonna be, can you guess what it is? green screen. Join Twitch, join YouTube, join Discord, join TikTok, join Twitter. All the best for gacha pools. I'll see you guys next time. Take it. Use code POKE for 10% off Gamers Subs. Use code POKE for 10% off Gamers Subs.